Welcome to PSL Plus. This training will cover the basics of PSL Plus as well as the advanced portion. Our agenda will start with setup, moving to the accounts payable cycle, and moving from there into cost reporting, payroll, and the like. First thing, when you get PSL Plus installed to your computer after you've been onboarded to your show or to your movie, whichever it may be, you'll receive a download link from Cast and Crew with your login information such as username and temporary password. Once you have received this, you may download PSL Plus to your computer. And when it is downloaded to your computer, you can open up the program by double clicking on it. Once opened, you'll be able to enter your username as well as your password. I'm going to enter my password now. Once you've entered your password, you can go ahead and hit OK or enter on your keyboard. You'll be greeted with multiple databases if you have access to multiple shows. If you're only on one show, you won't see the screen that I'm seeing here. Here in this case, we have 72 hours of fictitious production, as well as PSL Plus demo database 2. I'm going to hit OK on our 72 hours database. Once you've logged in, you'll see more options have appeared on your left-hand side, as well as the top of your screen. The first thing I would definitely recommend doing with PSL Plus is coming up to the upper right-hand side of your screen and selecting the maximize icon. This will enable full screen, making it a lot easier to see. First off, we'll discuss the general navigation of PSL Plus. On your left-hand side, you have file folders. You can think of these folders similar to your PC. When opening a folder, you'll get multiple different modules that you can open up from there. Just to touch on this, we'll be coming back to it in a few moments. On the top, we have our quick access icons, our quick access toolbar, if you will. Here we have AP, PO, journal entry, checks, petty cash. These are all just for quick access to the most commonly used areas of PSL. Another thing to bring up here will be our support, settings, open, logout options, as well as our database information in the upper right. When contacting PSL Plus support, it's important to notate your database as well as your production. It will help them help you at a much faster rate. So when you are contacting PSL support, simply include the information in the upper right of your PSL Plus and the domain name that follows. It will not be the same as the one you see here, ppslplus.castingcrew.com. It will most likely have your studio name or production name up there. It is important to include this information when contacting support, as it will help them help you much faster. When contacting support through PSL Plus, you can select the support icon here in the upper right-hand side. This will open up a web browser window to Cast and Crew's support website. Here you can make any searches you wish for any specific module or anything that you are looking for a how-to article, anything like that. Alternatively, you can scroll down, select the accounting icon here, and select PSL Plus. Once selected, you'll see various articles, PDF how-tos on how to utilize PSL Plus. All right, moving forward, we're going to discuss some general quality of life settings that you can utilize within PSL Plus. So in the upper right-hand side in settings, you have very many options to change the appearance of PSL Plus. One thing for me, I like to turn up the text size. You'll have an expanding window where you can pick the size of text. Just to give you guys a show of how this works, I'll select larger rather than large. It will minimize my screen, but I can always maximize it again. And you'll notice that my text has gotten quite a bit bigger here. So it can be very helpful if you find the text to be too small within PSL Plus. The default will be medium, but I personally like to use large. From there, we'll talk a little bit more about some ways we can improve our PSL Plus experience or change the quality of life or our specific needs for PSL Plus. In this case, I'll move to settings and talk about colors. So our default theme here is a white background, quite a bit bright. If you like that, you can leave it as your default theme. This is how PSL Plus will start. Personally, I used to like to go to colors here and go to dark theme. Dark theme is just a little bit easier on my eyes, I think. Moving down here, just one more thing to notate within settings is date format. Date format, auto detect local system settings. This refers to your date format, whether you're using the American date format, which is month, day, year, European date format, day, month, year, or international date format, year, month, day. If you'd like to use any of these specifically that differs from your computer's internal clock, you may select them here. So for example, if you're an American accountant using an American computer in Europe and you want to enter European dates, you can select European date format. This way, it will go ahead and convert that to the European date format. Just something to notate if you are working in a different area. So that is support and settings in the upper right-hand side of PSL Plus. We also have the option for opening another database. So earlier we discussed having multiple databases in your system. If you do have multiple databases, multiple productions that you are working on, you may select open from the upper right-hand side of your screen to see a list of these different databases that you may have access to. So moving forward, we'll discuss how to navigate PSL just a bit further, as well as how to set up our banks, company codes, currencies, and the like. On your left-hand side, you can open up the Setup folder by left-clicking on the Setup folder. This is everything that you'll need to set up your PSL Plus system for any transactional needs, as well as banks, company codes, currencies, free field coding, location codes, etc. We'll be opening up our bank setting first. Once selecting bank on the left-hand side, a window will appear called Bank Entry. Now in Bank Entry, what we'll see at the top here is our different areas that we can use to choose what type of record we're working with. Here we have Add, which is signified by a blue plus sign. You may press F4 to add a new bank entry into your system. Remember this Add key, as it will appear quite a bit throughout PSL Plus. When we enter anything into our system or looking to add a new record, we may do so by using the Add key, which is a blue plus sign, or we may press F4 on our keyboard. You'll notice that when I hover over the blue plus sign, it'll say Add F4 in parentheses. That's letting you know that you can use the function key 4 on your keyboard to quickly add a new record. You'll also see a blue icon here of a magnifying glass. This is to search for existing records in your system, or F7 Find. You may find records using this. There are some gray icons here, which will light up shortly once we pull up our record. However, I will talk about those momentarily. Up at the top here, we have our bank code. Now our bank code is usually a 3-digit either alpha or numeric or alphanumeric code to identify our production banking account. In this case, I already have production banking accounts in this particular setup. So what I'm going to do here is show you how to search for those existing bank accounts. By right-clicking in this field here, you may see your existing banks, if existing banks are in your system. If they aren't in your system, you would need to add your bank by pressing F4 or the blue plus sign at the top of the screen. I'm going to be bringing up our City National Bank, our US bank here, to give a understanding of how to fill out your bank information. Selecting City National Bank and hitting OK. And once again, that was found by right-clicking in the code field while it was blank. Here we have yellow fields. The yellow fields within PSL Plus indicate that these fields must be filled out with data before being able to save the data. In this case, I have bank code as a yellow field, name yellow field, as well as our account information, currency date information, and company information. These are all required to save your bank within the system. You can think of this as I'm adding a brand new bank. I've typed in my bank name and my bank code as City National Bank. I put in the address, as well as any contact information, phone information, and account information necessary. Moving to our right-hand side, we have our check numbering information. So this depends on whether you're using pre-numbered check stock or unnumbered check stock for your computer-generated checks. If you are using pre-numbered check stock, you will simply fill in the first check number that you have available in your pre-numbered check stock as the starting check number. If you are using unnumbered check stock, you may select the check number that you would like to start with. I would refer to your production or studio's handbook on this if necessary, as well as refer to your bank. However, the way the system works is that the starting check number will be the first check number cut out of the system using the computer check processing module. In this case, our first check number was 1, and it has automatically filled in our last used check of number 14. Once again, you can fill in your first check number. Once you've typed your first check, that will be your first check number, and it will count in a sequential order from there. EFT number information. So based on your bank and your EFT, whether you're using ACH or EFT, EFT being electronic fund transfer and ACH being automatic clearing house, fill in the correct ACH EFT information based on the numbering system given by your bank here. This will again count in order upwards from the first number you used. You may also change the prefix for EFT. So if you are using ACH, automatic clearing house, you can put in the prefix of ACH. If it is in EFT, you can put in EFT. Same goes for our wire transfer. The first wire transfer number used will be last used. Put in the very first wire transfer you'd like to use in here, as well as the prefix of WT for wire transfer. Moving down to currency and date information. We have currency information here selected as US currency. If I was adding a new bank, I would be able to right click in this field to select the bank currency. We would have a pick list of very many currencies from European currency to US to Swedish krones, etc. You would be able to choose that right here for your currency information. Moving forward to our date format. And now I may either click in this field to move forward from currency using my left click on my mouse, or I can press tab to move forward from fields into the next field. I can also use shift, so holding my left shift key on my keyboard and pressing tab will bring me back to my previous field. So tab forward, shift tab back. Pretty useful for data entry. In date format here, we have AM. We spoke a little bit about date format when we were utilizing our settings, how there's American date format, European date format, and international date format. You'll notice here that if I select in my date format and hover over, you'll see date format, AM for American, EU for European. Oh, and it went away. How am I going to see what I just saw again? Well, look in the lower left of your screen. Any area you've selected within PSL Plus, any text field you have highlighted, so in this case I have date format highlighted, it is going to give you the information in the lower left of your screen. We can see here in the lower left of the bank entry screen, date format, AM equal American, month, day, year, EU equal European, day, month, year, and IN equal international, year, month, day. This will be also relevant when we tab forward to bank type. When I tab down to bank type, you'll also see in the lower left of my screen, bank type, US equals United States, CA equals Canada, MX equals Mexico. Moving forward, we have our check form setup. So this refers to our computer-generated check forms that we will be using to print checks using PSL Plus. Here we have the MICR LA, so that is the Micker laser form, a fairly standard form that is utilized to cut checks from the system. If I clear out this check form and right-click in, so again, when PSL Plus has an area with existing data or something that you can pick data from, right-click in the text field and you'll be greeted with a pick list. In this case, I'm greeted with a pick list of different options for my computer check processing, whether that be MICR Canadian, double stubs, MICR laser form, which is pretty much the most common, or any others. If you have any questions on how to use your check print forms, there will be a PDF guide attached to this video to let you know how to set up your Micker laser form. Selecting Micker laser form here, I'll hit OK. And moving forward, we have our check prefix. If you do need to enter a check prefix for this bank and for the computer-generated checks coming from this bank, you may enter that here. It is typically a 3-digit, either alphanumeric or alphanumeric code. Moving forward, we have our account information, which is our required fields here in yellow. We have cash in bank, AP clearing, AP discount, PC box, and PC clearing. These need to be associated correctly with your chart of accounts. And a disclaimer here that the chart of accounts you see within this PSL system is not the one you will most likely be using. Your chart of accounts may be different than the one that you see here. So just be aware of that the coding that you're seeing is specific for my setup with my demonstration setup of PSL Plus. Here we have our cash and bank associated with our chart of accounts, CNB bank account USD. We have our AP clearing associated with our AP clearing for the City National Bank, as well as our AP discount for our AP clearing number 1, and our petty cash custodian account coding for PC box and PC clearing. We then have our company code here of 01. In this particular build of PSL Plus, I'm utilizing one single company code, so that is the only one in my system. However, you may have multiple company codes in your system, and each bank will have to be set up specifically for each company. So if you do have multiple codes, you may have multiple banks in the case that you have multiple company codes. If we make any changes here, so if I was to change the company code, anything like that, or change any sort of coding here, I'm just going to add a number here to open up some more options. You'll notice when I made a change to my account coding, my account information here, at the top of my screen, a few different areas have lit up. There is update and accept. So that I made changes to this existing record of a bank in my system. I may update this existing record by clicking on the update icon, the little two arrows going in a circle around each other, or I may select accept to accept my changes that I have made. Here, if I hit update, it would simply update the record and leave me with the record pulled up, so I would not lose my City National Bank. I would be able to keep working in this screen. If I hit accept, it will make the changes that I asked to make and simply bring me to a blank bank entry window. We'll see that in a moment. If I wanted to cancel my changes, so just completely back out of any changes I've made here, I can hit cancel. If we were entering a brand new bank, once we have filled out all of our yellow fields, we would be able to hit accept up at the top. So you can just think of it that way. If we were to make a brand new bank in general, we could just hit accept right up here once everything has been filled out. I'm going to go ahead and hit accept at the top of my screen, saving the change I made to our bank account number. Once that has been saved, it's going to bring me back to a blank form here, able to signify add by pressing F4 if I need to add another bank, or I can search for an existing bank either by pressing F7 on my keyboard, selecting the magnifying glass of find at the top, or I can right click in my code field. The next thing I'm going to show here by right-clicking in my code field to generate my pick list of available banks is our PC box bank. So occasionally on production, you may need to make a petty cash only bank for distributing petty cash. In this case, we have an example of that here as our PC box. I'll select OK. And with the PC box, once you have select PC box only checkbox on the right, you will only need to fill in the boxes of PC box and PC clearing. You will not need to fill in cash and bank, AP clearing, or AP discount, as this PC bank will not be associated to an actual bank. It is simply just for tracking petty cash, something that can be done if necessary. I'm going to cancel out of this screen, and since I did not make any changes, just let me cancel right out. And right-clicking into our code field to get that pick list of available options that I can select and bring a record up for, I'm going to select City National Bank and hit OK. Once I've done that, the last option I want to kind of show you guys here today will be Detail F3 at the top of your screen. In the screen of bank entry, we have a very specific detail screen that you can pull up. You may press the F3 key on your keyboard or select the little piece of paper at the top of your screen. Once I select that, it will bring up my MICR LA check form here for editing. So when we need to set up our MICR LA check forms, our computer generated checks, we can utilize this screen here. And just note that attached to this video today, you will be able to select a PDF file walking you through how to set up your MICR LA forms. If you have any issues with this whatsoever, please feel free to call us at support and we can help walk you through. But please do check out the PDF how-to guide on how to set up your MICR LA form. With that, that is our bank entry window. Moving forward with our training, we will be closing out the window. One thing I like to practice with PSL Plus is to keep my windows nice and tidy and make sure that I'm keeping my screen clean. So I just go ahead and X out when I'm done with a work area. Since I made some changes here to the bank, PSL is being very smart and seeing that I made a change, but I didn't save it and I didn't hit cancel. So in this case, it's letting me know that I may cancel changes and exit to menu, or I may accept changes and exit to menu. If I accept, the changes that I've made will be saved and will exit me from this menu. If I hit cancel, the changes I've made will be canceled and not saved, and I will exit to menu. I'm going to select C, cancel changes, and exit to menu. That was bank setup entry under our setup folder, and that was bank entry. Moving forward, we'll talk about our company code. So if you do have multiple companies in your system, you're working with a multi-company production, you may have multiple company codes. On the left-hand side of your screen, below change password and below batch maintenance, you will see company code. Select company code to open this field. In this case, we can see the available company codes by right-clicking in the company code screen here. As I brought up in bank entry, if there is available data within a field, you most likely can right-click to pull that available data. You may also use your find key, the magnifying glass, or F7 on your keyboard. Selecting find at the top of your screen here will bring up available company codes. In this case, I just have the one of 01 72 Hours Productions, Inc. If you had multiple codes, you would be able to page through using the arrow icons on the upper left to change the company code and see the different information. In this case, the only required fields for company codes are name and name on reports. Name on reports is what will come up on the reports when running them in relation to the company code. As with anything else in PSL Plus, if we need to add a new company code, I can select Add F4 at the top of my screen once I've entered in my company information. We'll ask if I'd like to enter this company information, and I can say yes. In this case, to keep my database clean, I'm not going to add a new one, but it is simple as adding another company code if necessary. Closing out my company code screen, I'll be moving forward into our currency coding, selecting currency on the left-hand side from setup. So currencies is located within the setup folder under currencies. In currencies here, we can search for existing currencies if we'd like by using our find key at the top of the screen or F7. And what we'll bring up is our first currency code. In this case, it is Canadian dollars. I have the code as CD for Canadian dollars, as well as the description Canadian dollars and the country of Canada. Our budget rate information is quite important here as it says 1.25. That is referring to 1.25, our base currency. In this current production and example we are using today, our base currency is US dollars, valued at 1.0. Our Canadian dollars are valued at 1.25 based on our budgeted currency conversion rate of US dollars. So 1.25 times US dollars is our Canadian budgeted conversion rate. Make sure to put this in based on your budgeted conversion rate if you are working with multiple currencies in multiple countries. We also have the date in which it was entered. So in this case, it was entered on 12/27/2021, and the ISO, so the international currency symbol here, which would be Canadian dollar, CAD. We then have the check printing information on the lower left. So check printing information says pay bill, dollars, and cents, pay to the order of. We can also, now in the upper left-hand side of our screen, select our next page as we have multiple currencies within our system. Any area we use our find key in PSL Plus and have multiple results from our search, we can utilize the record page indicator in the upper left of our screen. If I select the arrow pointing to the right, it will bring me to the next available entry within currencies. In this case, that would be euros, EU, for our European currency. European currency is valued here at 0.88 based on our budgeted conversion rate. And if I page forward one more time using these arrows in the upper left-hand side of my screen, I will see our base currency of US dollars valued at 1.0, along with our descriptions, ISO, date, and bill information. So check printing information here. That's setting up currencies within PSL Plus. If you need to add a new currency, you could do so here on a blank screen by entering in the currency information. We'll be moving forward now to free field code entry. An example of free field codes are things that fall outside of your budget, anything that needs to be tracked in addition to your regular cost accounts. So I've opened up free field 1 under setup on my left-hand side of my screen. I may enter any new free field coding that I need. An example of free field coding that I can give today would be state or country tax incentives. So to track whether something qualifies for a tax incentive in the state that we are working on our production in. In this case, to find available free field codes that have already been entered into your system, you may select the Find key at the top of your screen, which is signified by the magnifying glass once again, or press F7. Once you've done that, it will populate with your codes and descriptions. These are typically used in free field 1, I've noticed, to track tax incentives, but can be used for other things such as marking something as an asset or a liability, anything that needs to be marked off there using our free field coding. In this case, an example I'll give you of a new free field code that we could add to our system would be, let's see, we are working in Georgia and we are going after the Georgia tax incentive. I could use the code of GA, press tab, and type in Georgia tax incentive. Anything that qualifies for that Georgia tax incentive, I could mark using my free field 1 as it does qualify by using the code GA, and anything that doesn't qualify, I could use the code of NQ. Depending on your production in studio, you may have different guidelines working with free field codes, so be sure to check with the finance controller at the studio or production or financier. In this case, if I wanted to finalize adding my Georgia tax incentive, all I would need to do is come up to the top of my screen and click the blue check mark to accept adding this to my system. And then it would be available for use for me to code any financial transactions to this specific free field. In the case I would want to cancel and not add this, I can simply hit cancel, but I'll show you once again what happens if I add data and I don't cancel and I don't save and try to close my window. It will say that you've changed data. Would you like to accept changes and exit to menu, or would you like to cancel changes and exit to menu? In this case, to not fill up my system with the irrelevant data, I will be canceling not to add my Georgia tax incentive there. But again, you may add any free fields that you may need by simply typing them in and hitting accept at the top of your screen. We'll select cancel changes and exit to menu, but that's adding a free field code within your system. I'll reiterate one more time on that by selecting free field 2. This functions exactly the same as free field 1. It is just an additional free field for use if necessary. Once opening up free field 2 here, we will be able to add any additional free field codes in a separate column that we may need to track. In the case of my system, I will select Find at the top to just show you what I currently have. And in my free field 2, all we are using this for currently is to track whether something is an asset or not. So again, free fields can be utilized as necessary based on your production, studio, and financier needs. So that was entering free field codes within PSL Plus under Setup. Moving forward, we'll talk a bit about location codes. So below free field, we can move down to locations and adding location codes within Setup folder location codes. Once you have opened location code entry, you will have your production, as well as your location and description of that location. Again, I'm going to use our search icon at the top. I'm going to press F7 on my keyboard and bring up available existing data. In this case, we have our location of 00 default, our location 01 of Los Angeles City, and our location 02 of Toronto, Canada. If we need to add any new locations, we can do so here. For example, if I need to add Mexico City, I can do so just like that, adding in the location code of 03 and typing in the description of Mexico City. I then can hit accept, and that would save location 03 and make it available for my use on any transaction lines throughout the system. In this case, in order not to cloud up our system, I'm going to hit cancel. But again, if we hit accept, we would save Mexico City as a location code within our system. Again, it's going to tell me that I have added one location code entry. Do you really want to cancel your addition? As I just said, I would like to not add this code. So I'm going to hit yes, I would like to cancel. This will make sure that I do not add that Mexico City code into my system. That's location code entry within PSL Plus. Below are series coding. So if you are working on an episodic production and you need to track cost, expenditures, etc. by series coding, whether it belongs to a certain episode or not, you may use the series code field. Series codes here found below production codes. Right here, you have your production number as well as your series and description. This works very similarly to the last few code screens we've been in. If you've been paying attention, you'll see that our code screens are quite easy to add and work with. They all work very similarly. In this case, I'm going to search to see what available episodes we have. And in my current setup, I have our default of 000, our episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, and episode 5, as well as our amortization budget, which pertains to all episodes, any costs that pertain to every episode rather than just a single episode. So in this case, if we need to add one more episode, I can type in 106 and type in epi 106 and hit accept at the top of my screen, and that would add episode 106 to our system. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and accept and actually add this to my system. Once I hit accept here, it will clear my screen and bring me back to a blank screen. Let's say I want to make sure that was added for whatever reason. I'm like a little bit, did I add that? Well, I'll press F7 here on my keyboard to search, and now you will see that episode 106 is available within our series coding. That's adding a series code, an episodic code within the PSL Plus. And once again, that was series codes within our setup. If you need to add set codes to your system, you can select set codes on the left-hand side of your screen. So if you're charging anything to sets, construction, anything like that, that may need to be utilized with the set coding field, you may select set codes on the left-hand side, and you may add those set codes similarly to how we added series, free field, etc. Press F7 on your keyboard to search for existing if you'd like to see before adding new. And in this case, for my production, we aren't charging to sets, so we just have our default of 0000. Set is usually a required field within PSL Plus, so you would usually have one default coding of set even if you aren't utilizing sets. Once again, that was set coding for PSL Plus to add a new set code to your system under the setup area. In that case, folks, that is our setup training. Those are how we set up any codes, banks, currencies, etc. within our PSL system. For setting up chart of accounts codes, we will be using GL coding later in our course. From there, what we will move to is our accounting cycle. So the accounting cycle within production accounting refers to paying vendors for goods and or services rendered for our production, utilizing purchase orders, invoices, and check processing. This may be done by locating your accounts payable on the left-hand side. So the accounts payable folder will open up and you will see 3 additional folders under accounts payable. These are subfolders of accounts payable. We have vendor, AP entry, and 1099. We'll be opening up vendor here on the left-hand side. So in order to add a vendor, a business that is supplying goods and or services to your production, a record into your system, you will go to vendor under accounts payable on the left-hand side and select vendor entry. Once you have opened vendor entry, you will be able to search for existing vendors in your system. So if your vendors have already been loaded in by the studio or financier, or if you need to add a new vendor, you will be able to do so here. As we discussed earlier, yellow fields are required within PSL Plus. The 3 required fields to enter a vendor into your system are vendor ID, vendor name, and W-9 on file. W-9 referring to the US government W-9. In this case, if we would like to add a new vendor, we have several options. You may add a new vendor with your own vendor ID. This would be based on your production or studio or finance guidelines here. You can do this via alphabetical or alphanumeric or numeric. I could add a vendor with ABA 101. However, if I was not to enter any vendor ID here, I can simply press F4 or click the add on the top of my screen to add a new vendor record, and it will automatically assign the next available vendor number. So the next available vendor in my system would be 103, indicating that I have 102 other vendors within my system. I'm going to go ahead and clear out this ad. We will be adding a vendor, but I would like to show how to search for vendors. I'm going to hit cancel, hit yes here to cancel my changes. In the case of searching for a vendor, you have multiple options. You can search via vendor ID. So if you had the number of the vendor, and let's say in this case, I knew my vendor was 102, I can type in 102 and press tab, and it will immediately pull up the vendor number with the vendor ID 102. This is the production rental folks here. All vendor names here are very fake, not real names, so no worries there. In this case, if I select anything I would like to change with this vendor, I can go ahead and make changes here. However, in the upper right here, if I want to cancel out of making changes for my vendor, I can simply hit cancel here. Another way to search within PSL Plus, let's say all I know about the vendor, I know that the vendor has the word PROD in the name, has something about production in the name, but I don't remember anything else about the vendor, but I need to search for it. A good way to do this would be to type in the letters or parts of the name you do remember and pressing Shift 8 on your keyboard, so the asterisk sign after the word. So in this case, I typed in PROD for production and put an asterisk at the end. Now what happens if I select Find at the top of my screen, either by pressing F7 or clicking on the magnifying glass, what will happen is it will bring up the first available vendor with the word PROD. So by putting an asterisk after the word, it will search for anything with that word in it. In this case, it brought up production accounting vendor. You'll also notice, again, my arrows at the top of my screen have lit up blue, letting me know that I can utilize them. This means I can page through existing vendor records. If I want to page to our next vendor, it's going to show me another vendor with production in the title because I searched for PROD asterisk. This is called a wildcard search and can be very useful to help search for vendors, especially if you have quite a few vendors in your system. Again, moving forward, I see production vehicles. It is only bringing up a search of vendors with the word PROD in the title. And then I can click this, the last page, to go to the last page, the last available record, which is our production rental folks here. And I can select first to go back to the very first vendor that I selected. Hitting cancel in my upper right to bring me back to a blank screen so I may search again or add a new record. Just hit that cancel key, the circle with the X inside of it, to being brought back to add a new record or search for a record. Other option for searching here is coming to vendor ID and right-clicking in the field. So as we discussed earlier, if a field in PSL Plus has data available for you to pick from, you may right-click in the field using your mouse, and it will bring up an available pick list. You'll be able to choose between your vendors here. If you'd like to sort by vendor number, simply click the number of vendor in the left-hand side, and it will sort by the vendor number. If you'd like to sort by name, click on name, and it will sort alphabetically by name. You may also sort alphabetically by city. Different ways you can sort here, but very useful for searching for a vendor. Hitting cancel from here, and just to reiterate, right-click in the vendor ID to bring up an available pick list of vendors. We're going to add a new vendor today, so I'm going to press F4 on my keyboard. Alternatively, I can click the blue plus sign at the top of my screen. And once I press F4, it will auto-assign the vendor ID. If I wanted to add my own vendor number, I would have just filled out that vendor number before pressing the add key. I'll be adding here production rental co /the. So I use the / key above my enter key and below my backspace key and put the word the at the end. The name of this company is the Production Rental Company. And in this case, I want the checks to print as the Production Rental Company. However, when I search for this vendor, I would much rather search by the word production rather than the word the. Because if I search for all my vendors as the, I might come up with quite a lot of vendors. It might be hard to sift through. So it's recommended to enter names for vendors that you are working with or payee vendors, employees, etc. with the last name or uncommon name first, then / the first name. Checks will print correctly and come out with the Production Rental Co. However, we are able to search much easier for this vendor company here. So that's how you search for your vendor company using the uncommon word first / common word last. Moving forward, we'll talk about our address and vendor information. We have address line 1 can be filled in, informational. Address line 2, city, state, zip code, country, contact. which would be the name of the person at the vendor that you have most contact with, as well as phone number, so the phone number for the vendor, fax number for the vendor, as well as email for the vendor. We also have the card numbers. So if a specific credit card is utilized with this vendor, or you send a specific payment to their card number, you can put that information in here. We then have our EFT sort code, EFT account number, EFT high value code, ACH routing number, as well as ACH account number. If you are using EFTs or ACH and you are paying this vendor via EFT or ACH, you must fill in these fields with the vendor's EFT or ACH information. Attached to this video will be a PDF guide on how to process and work with ACH and EFTs. Please see below for that. Moving forward, we also have our account type. This refers to, as we can see in the lower left, again, if you select an area of blank field within PSL Plus, you will see the description of that field in the lower left of your entry window. In this case, we see EFT ACH bank account type. There are two options, C for checking, S for savings. Tabbing forward to our TIN information here, we have our tax identification number information with the name, tax ID, type, 1099, and work state. We'll be going through each of these. If the tax identification number information differs in any way from the regular name of the business, you can put that in here. So in this case, we could put something like Savage/Jesse. There we go. I could put in my tax identification name there, as well as the tax number. So if it was a social security number, etc. One thing to show here is that this social security number, 55555, obviously a fake social security number, has already been used in our system. PSL does not allow for duplicate SSN/SIN numbers, so they will check you on that information if you are to accidentally enter a duplicate social or the like. In this case, I'll clear out the tax identification name. We'll put in the name of the person that will be receiving the 1099 at the end of the year, or the T4A if you're working in Canada. You can enter that in here, as well as the tax ID, and as well as the type of TIN information. So again, with any field within PSL Plus that there's available data that we can pick from, we can see by using the right-click option. If I right-click in the type field, I'll be brought up with the different types of 1099 here. I can put in not a 1099able vendor, telling my system this is not a vendor that we will be issuing 1099s to. I can mark off that it is a sole proprietor with a EIN, or a sole proprietor with a SSN, or a corporation, or a partnership, or simply other/unknown. I'll go ahead and use sole proprietor SSN for this example. Tabbing forward to our next area, we have the 1099 field. Right-clicking on this field will bring up a pick list of 1099 available boxes on the U.S. government 1099. We have codes 1 through 9 here, as well as A, B, and C. Typically, the most often used codes in my experience are 1 for rentals and 7 for non-employee compensation. So if this was a taxable vendor and we need to keep track of what we are purchasing or working with this vendor, you may select the most appropriate 1099 type. In this case, this will auto-assign to every transaction we do with this vendor. So every time if I select rents here for 1 rentals and hit OK, every time I do any kind of transaction for this vendor, it will automatically assign the 1099 coding of 1 rentals. That doesn't mean that it is locked in. I can't change it. I will be able to change it based on each transaction line. However, it will default to 1099 code 1. And you will see that when we move into purchase order and to invoicing. We then can put W-9 on file. So very important here, if you're working in the States and you have the US government W-9 for the vendor on hand, it's important to mark this as yes, that you have the W-9. And it is equally important to mark this as no, I don't have the W-9 if you do not. This is because if you do this correctly from the start of your production, you will have accurate reports letting you know whether a W-9 is on file or not. When you run a vendor inquiry report or a vendor list report, you may select to only see vendors that you have W-9s for, or only vendors that you do not have a W-9 for. So this can be particularly useful when tracking whether you have a W-9 on file for the vendor or not. So make sure to enter that truthfully and correctly every time. Work state here, if it is a specific work state that this vendor is performing goods and services or work in, such as California, Georgia, etc., you may mark this off here and it will automatically be assigned when dealing with any sort of transactions with this vendor. In this case, I will mark down California as the work state. You are also able to right-click in this field to see a variety of data that you can utilize. So again, with any area of PSL Plus that data is available, you may right-click using your mouse in that text field to get a pick list. And we do also have Canadian provinces here as well, such as Nova Scotia, etc. Putting in California here for work state, we then have below our terms with the vendor. So this refers to if we have any sort of agreement in terms of payment with the vendor. Typically, these terms may be net 15, which would signify that after an invoice, a bill is sent from this vendor, that our payment with this vendor is due. I am currently in due dates, 15 days after the invoice has been received. You may set this up within your system, and you will see that when you enter an invoice for this vendor, it will automatically put the due date 15 days after today's date. So it can be very useful if you are utilizing any sort of special terms with a vendor, whether it's net 30, net 15, whatever that agreement may be, you can utilize it. I will keep this in to show how this works within the invoice and purchase order entry screens. Moving forward, we have our other information here. So other information in relation to the vendor. We can type in any sort of internal comment that would be needed to keep track of anything specific about this vendor internally within our production accounting department. So in this case, if it is something simple like paid via computer check only, we can put that information in, and there are reports that we can run to see that information. Also, if someone brings this vendor up, they will be able to see that comment and know that it is paid via computer check only. Studio vendor here is dependent on which studio you are working for. If you're working for a studio that requires entry of this field, please check your production handbook as well as with your studio financier to see if this is a necessary field for you to fill out. This field is typically used when the studio has a different numbering mechanism than what you see on the upper left here of vendor ID. Vendor type, if this is available in your system and you do see this and it needs to be filled out, you have two options, trade vendor or payee vendor. Trade vendor would be any sort of vendor supplying goods and or services. Payee vendor would be any sort of vendor that is an employee of the production, a crew member, etc. Moving down here, we have our check boxes. This signifies to our system whether the receiver is a petty cash receiver. So if this vendor is receiving petty cash, we can select the petty cash checkbox, or if they are receiving a purchase card, we can select the purchase card checkbox. What you'll notice as I've checked those off is it has created two more required fields for me with the PC advance account as well as the P card advance account. So in the PC advance account here, this refers to our chart of accounts. We would code this to our petty account, cash account assigned to this vendor. In this case, I'll enter in 7107-000. Once again, your chart of accounts may be different than mine. In this case, it came up with petty cash. The importance here is that if we do want to utilize this vendor within our petty cash module found on the left-hand side of our screen, we do need to check the box of petty cash in order for that vendor to appear within the petty cash module. In this case, we would need to check the box and enter the appropriate account number. This same goes for P card. If they had a P card advance account, you would need to put that in as well. And that would allow you to issue petty cash or P card to this vendor. Later in this training, we will have examples of petty cash transactions as well as P card transactions. I'll be deleting these out. But once again, if you have a P card or petty cash receiver, please make sure to check off these boxes within vendor entry and fill out the appropriate advance information. Unchecking those boxes and moving forward, we have ACH EFT. So if a vendor is paid via ACH or EFT, please check off the box of ACH EFT here under vendor flag to flag this vendor to be able to receive ACH or EFT payments. And again, please refer to the PDF guide attached to this video. Moving forward, we have merchant only. If the vendor is simply a merchant and does not need to be tracked on the level of a vendor with the W-9 ETC, if it is simply just a merchant, such as a small merchant you've spent a small amount of money on and you just simply have a receipt for, you can utilize the merchant only flag. Inactive will inactivate a vendor, preventing it from receiving any sort of transactions or being added to any sort of transaction screens. Typically not used, but if you do need to utilize this as your business relationship with this vendor has concluded and you want to make sure no payments are issued to the vendor, you can select inactive here. It will inactivate the vendor. However, if you do need to reactivate this vendor and you've re-engaged this vendor for goods and services or re-establish your business relationship, you may search for this vendor record and uncheck this and it will become active again. Customer number, this is a fun one. This simply refers to what is our customer number with this specific vendor. So if we have a very specific number that is given to us by the production rental co here, they said, hey, your production's account number with us is 1602. We can put that information in under customer number. So when we need to contact this vendor, we have that information and they ask, hey, what is your account number with us? We can say 1602. Just a helpful field to keep track of data. Moving forward, we have the default account. So if we knew the default account coding for this vendor, we wanted this vendor to always be coded to that specific cost account within our chart of accounts. You can type that in here. So in this case, if I typed in 2618-000, it would bring up my SPFX rentals based on my chart of accounts. And every time I work with this vendor, it will automatically code in 2618-000. However, I will be able to change this account coding if necessary. I'm going to leave that as is so we can see that in action in some further screens. Additionally, we have our detail field. So we mentioned this back in bank. Detail up at the top of your screen, the little piece of paper, F3. You can also find detail on the upper right-hand side of your screen. And press detail over here to the right, and you will see various options here that you can work with. You can find a little more information attached to this video within the PSL Plus manual for these various detail screens. However, I will notate that the EFT fields is an important one. If working with EFTs or ACH with a vendor, you will likely want to fill this out, and that will be included in the EFT guide attached to this video. So once again, if you'd like to add an EFT, please come to detail, press F3, and fill out this information. This is the EFT ACH information for the vendor, not for the production. With that said, if we are ready to save our vendor, we may select accept at the top of our screen, and it will save and add the vendor ID of 103. Hitting accept, we have saved our vendor. Once you have entered your vendor into your system with the W-9 and are ready to enter a purchase order for the vendor, you may close up your vendor folder, close up your accounts payable. It is always nice to keep a tidy system there, and select purchase order on the left-hand side. That will open up your purchase order or purchase order entry area. We can select PO entry to enter a purchase order for this vendor. However, we can also select at the top of our screen with the quick access menu, PO. You'll notice that PO entry has been highlighted on my left. That's because it simply clicked it for me. This is our PO entry screen. Now that we've entered PO entry, there's a few options here. We can search as we've seen before in other areas of our program. Search using F7 find. You may search with vendor ID, purchase order number, so on and so forth. Searching is an option here as well, but what we'll start with is adding a new purchase order for that production rental code that we just added into our system. So in this case, I'd be working from a paper PO on my desktop here, and I would be entering that purchase order information in relation to the last vendor we just entered. Pressing F4 on my keyboard, it will add a new reference transaction number. So the transaction reference number is added into our system when we press F4. It is not saved until we save our transaction. So this 190 number, meaning my 190th transaction, will not be saved until I click this check mark at the top of my screen. The effective date will fill out from today's date based on my computer's date format, or if I've selected in settings in the upper right, my date format as a different date format. It would pull up in that way based on that. We then can put in the description here. So I'll put in production truck rental. I'll abbreviate this, truck 310 to 411. So putting in that we're renting a truck for 1 month from this vendor, production truck rent 310 to 411. Tabbing forward to my next area here, I have batch information. A batch within PSL Plus, you can think of as your digital file folder for today's work. So all work that you do, all entries into your system, whether that be PO, petty cash, payroll, journal entry, etc., will be added into a batch. Your batch is typically your initials followed by today's date. In this case, it is JS for my initials, followed by the year 22, month 03, and day 10. So March 10th, 2022. You don't need to make a new batch. This will be automatically created for you daily once you have entered in information into the system. So that is your digital file folder housing your work for the day within PSL Plus. Usually a new one is created daily. You have your production company information here. For production code, I have simply PROD. We then have company code. So again, if you're working with multiple companies, you may select the different company code here. And then we have our currency to select here. It's important to mark your currency correctly in the purchase order screen. If you are paying a purchase order with an American bank with USD, you should be putting in the currency of USD, because if we put in the currency of, let's say, Canadian and try to pay it with a American bank, the system will tell us that is an error and we'll need to go back and change this to the correct currency. So it's always good to notate the correct currency. From here, we have our vendor information. So assigning the vendor to the purchase order. Typically here, you can enter in that vendor ID. So if you know the vendor ID, in this case, we know we just entered vendor ID 103. However, if I don't know the vendor ID and I simply want to search for a vendor in this column, I can right click, as we do in other areas of PSL Plus, and you'll be brought to that pick list we've discussed so much today. And I can pick between available vendors. It will automatically sort by name alphabetically. However, if I want to sort by vendor number, I can click on the vendor column here to my right and sort by vendor number. I'll select the production rental co here. Bringing in that production rental co, I have my vendor information of 103. State worked, as I put in on the tax information for this vendor that they are working in the state of California. It's automatically been assigned for me. However, if I do need to change this to, let's say, Georgia, I may change it to Georgia, no problem there. But it automatically assigns to California. I can also delete this out if necessary. We then have the purchase order number. This is typically found on the physical purchase order or the PDF of the purchase order you're receiving. If you're using digital purchase order, which we'll talk about in a moment, I'll show you how to find that. But the purchase order number is typically found on the purchase order itself at the top, usually in the upper right or upper left. Enter that into your system. If it is a purchase order that has already been entered into the system, so we already have that purchase order entered into the system, PSL will give you an error letting you know, hey, you've already entered this purchase order into the system. So there are checks and balances in that regard. We then have the expiry date of the purchase order. So if purchase order is set to an expire at a certain date, you can put that date in here. What PSL Plus will do in the system if you enter this in is, let's say I put this as 3/15/2022 and we have not relieved this purchase order by 3/15/2022, it'll mark as past due. It will mark as past due. This is just dependent on your production studio and financier guidelines, whether you need to enter this or not, or you want to utilize this field. It is an optional field for expiry date. We then have PO type. So this refers to if you have any way of identifying your purchase orders and their different types, whether that's by saying it's an art PO, anything like that, you can put that in here to track the different types of PO if you are utilizing different types of PO. If not, it is an optional field, completely up to your production, studio, etc. if you'd like to use it. We can enter in our purchase order amount here. I'll be entering in $1,250. These numbers may not be wholly accurate on what you would usually see on a production. Again, these are just examples, so please keep that in mind. PO amount being filled out as $1,250. When you press tab, it will automatically fill out your remaining amount with the amount of the PO. So it's saying that we have $1,250 left in this PO. Tabbing down to my account coding here, I am now in my transaction line where I can detail each transaction of the PO onto the system. Here we have the automatic account coding of 2618, that's 000, which when I highlight this text field, you can see in the lower left, it's giving me an account description based on my chart of accounts. In this case, this is referring to special effects rentals. If I wanted to add a different account number and I was not sure of which account number to add, I can delete this out, right click in the field, and be greeted with a list of available account numbers from my entire chart of accounts. Typically, the purchase order will have the account number already written on to the purchase order, and you'll simply copy from there. But if at any point you do need to bring up your chart of accounts at a moment's notice, you can simply right click into the account field, scroll through, and look for the account that you need. In this case, I'm going to leave it defaulted to 2618-000. We're going to say that this production truck rental has to do with our SPFX rental budget. Tabbing forward, you will have your series code. So if you need to code this to a specific episode, such as 101, you may do so. Make sure those are added within setup and within code. You will need to make sure they are added and utilized and correctly saved within setup. So in the beginning portion of our training for these to be available. But if you right click in this field as well, it will bring up the available. Just like we added earlier, episode 106, it's available for my use since I saved that episode there. I'm going to assign this to our amortization budget, so more cost there. We then can enter in our location details, and just like any other field with available data in PSL Plus, simply right click in when blank and be able to select that data if you are unsure. I'm going to select the location of 01. I'm going to leave our sets as 0000. And then we have our 9 field. 9 field refers to the U.S. government 1099. If you recall earlier when we set up our vendor, we selected the 1099 coding of 1 for rentals from this vendor. So in this case, we do have it already filled in for us. But if we need to delete this out, it wasn't taxable for whatever reason, you can simply delete it and move forward to the next field. However, I'm going to leave that coding of 1 to signify that this is a rental that needs to be taxed. We then have our insurance coding. If necessary, you can put that in, as well as your free field coding. In this case, I'll put that this is a California qualified spend. If it was a non-qualified spend, I could put NQ in here. And please refer to your production's free field coding, as it may be different than what we see in our example here today. We then have our free field coding too, which if you recall, the only one I have in my system is A for asset. This isn't an asset, so I won't be putting that in. But we now have our description, which is pulled from the top area here. It has pulled down production truck rent, 310 to 411 here. I can come down here, and if I want to make this description larger, so I want to make this column larger, hover my mouse to the right-hand side of the description. It will create a white arrow pointing left and right. I can hold left click and drag this out to give myself a little more screen real estate and be able to read what is in the description. And you can do that with any field. So if you wanted to make your free field smaller for whatever reason, you can do it. So if you ever have an issue where you are stuck like this and you're like, I can't see my free field 1, just come over to this little area here, hold your left click, drag it out. Here we have the amount of $1,250 automatically being pulled from our PO amount at the top of our screen here, and our remaining amount. What I'm going to type in here is 1,000. So I'm changing the amount for the truck rental from $1,250 to 1,000. I'm going to create an additional transaction line. When I do that and tab to my next line, you'll see at the top that I've distributed 1,000 And then when I tab through, it will automatically copy down the series, location, sets, 1099, insurance, free field 1 and free field 2. And it will also assign automatically that remaining $250. In this case, I'm going to put, instead of production truck rent, I'm going to put production truck insurance. So I'm marking that out as we're paying $250 for a month of the insurance, and then we have our rental for our truck there. Once you are done entering your purchase order, everything looks good and correct, you can come to the top of your screen and select accept. This will save the purchase order to your system and finally assign that transaction reference number of 190 to the purchase order. Just for a quick look here, after I've saved, it's simply save that purchase order. Let's say I want to search for that specific purchase order. I can type the number of 190 for that transaction number into the reference transaction number field and select F7 on my keyboard or press find at the top of my screen. And what will be brought up is that purchase order, and I can make any changes to that purchase order if necessary. That's entering a purchase order within PSL Plus. I'm going to go up to my upper left-hand side of my screen, select exit on PO, and from there, we'll discuss shortly how to add DPO files into your system. With that in mind, you may load DPO file here. In the future, there will be DPO integration where it will automatically be loaded. For DPO, we have a attached PDF file here to this training video. All right, so moving forward that we have our PO into our system, we'll next be moving to accounts payable. So after you have entered your purchase order for the vendor providing goods and services to your system, you'll eventually be sent an invoice, which amounts to a bill for the goods and services rendered. You may select accounts payable on the left-hand side, as well as AP entry subfolder. And there's two ways to select your AP entry screen. You can either select AP at the top of your screen from the quick access bar menu, which is number 1, A/P, or you may select AP entry from the AP entry subfolder. Once open, it looks very similar to our purchase order entry screen, as a lot of the information we'll be entering is quite similar, as it is the bill for the purchase order. In this case, what we'll do first to add a new invoice into our system, to catalog that invoice within our system, is press our F4 key or select the plus sign at the top of your screen. Once you've selected that plus sign, you'll be assigned a transaction number. My last transaction number was 190, so my next one is 191. I then have the effective date, which is automatically pulled from my computer's clock as 3/10/2022, and then I have the description. I'm going to leave our description blank just to show you how that works. We'll leave it blank. We'll come back to that in a moment. Tab forward, you will have your batch information. Important part about PSL that I mentioned before is that your batch is usable throughout all entry modules of PSL Plus. So in this case, I have that same batch with my initials followed by today's date. We then have our production company coding as well as our bank. I will type in our American Bank of CNB, but alternatively, you can right click in this field to find the bank you are looking for and select that bank, then hit OK. It's automatically assigned the currency of US as my system during bank setup. We set this up as a US bank. It knows the correct bank. Moving down here, we'll press tab and we will jump to vendor ID. If I have the vendor ID available, I can simply enter that in. But once again, you can right click in this field to select the vendor from a pick list. I will select production rental company there. We do have that state worked automatically filled in. Once again, you can change that if necessary. And then we have our invoice information, typically found on the invoice that is provided by the vendor. So I will type in here, PRC 1020, 110,020 here. That will be the fake invoice number we're using for today. We then have the date of this invoice. So I can type in, it came in today's date. And if you recall, we set up with this vendor that our term says that after we receive an invoice, we have 15 days to pay them. We put in the terms of 15 due days. You'll see here that my due date has now automatically filled out to 3/25/2022 because in vendor entry, we signified that the due dates are 15 days out. This still can be changed, so if the vendor actually needs the payment today and the due date is today, you can still change it to that due date. You may then put in the amount of the invoice. And for payment information, here we can select whether this is a check, EFT or ACH, or wire transfer. So if we are paying this via check, you would leave this selected as C. If you are paying it via EFT, you would use E. That also would be for ACH, E for EFT or ACH, and W for wire transfer. Make sure you are processing those correctly based on what you need to be doing there. For EFT and ACH, again, we do have a document attached to this training video in which will help you issue your EFT payments. I will go with C for check. We then have combine. So you can see in the lower left-hand side of the screen here where my mouse is hovering, combine the invoice with others for this vendor onto one check. If we leave this selected as 0, all invoices for this vendor will be combined onto one check. So when we go to print a check for this vendor, it will put all of the invoices onto the one check. If your vendor is needing separate checks for each invoice, you may assign out the different numbering. So if we wanted one check for this, just put in 1. Number 1 will signify to the system that this is not to be grouped with other like payments for this vendor, and it is to be cut on its own for the computer generated check. I'll leave this as 0 to tell my system that yes, I would like all payments for this vendor combined onto one check. We then have the checkbox of hold. This would print hold for pickup on the computer generated check. So if you do need it to say hold for pickup, go ahead and select this and it will print the words hold for pickup on the computer generated check. We then have the option to enter a check number. If we enter in a check number and fill out the date and amount, this signifies to our system that this is a manual check that we have already written and sent out to the vendor. So this would be telling the system that this is a manual check. All you would need to do from here to notate that this has been a posted processed check, that it has been paid, etc., is that you would need to simply post this invoice. If we leave this blank, we would need to perform check processing through our computer check processing to mark it as paid. So just so you know there. Tabbing down to our purchase order number here, you'll notice I've been greeted with a pick list screen of available purchase orders for this vendor. In this case, I have production truck rent here 310 to 411. In this case, I can select this. If there was multiple purchase orders for this vendor available, I would see them here and I would be able to select multiples if I would like. However, there is only the one and I'm selecting that one that we entered earlier. So, okay. What's going to happen here, it's going to bring up my fetch PO line list. In this case, it is showing my purchase order that we just entered in the earlier portion of our course, and I'm able to fetch the purchase order transaction lines. To fetch both of these lines, I can click on the checkboxes to the left, or if I only wanted to select one, I can uncheck one and fetch just the single line. In this example, we'll be fetching both lines. And as I mentioned earlier here, at the top of our screen, our description was blank. Since I left that blank and I brought my purchase order into my invoice, so I associated the purchase order for this vendor with the invoice I'm entering, it automatically filled in my description for me based on the purchase order that was entered. It also filled in the description for my line items here as well. If I needed to change these, I can absolutely do so. However, once I've checked this all over, it looks good. I may hit accept at the top of my screen, and that will save this invoice and get it ready for posting. I will hit accept, and we have now saved our invoice that we just entered. Once again, to search for any invoice, anything in your system, you may do so via vendor or via transaction reference number. I'll type in that transaction reference number of 191 and hit find at the top of my screen, and that will show us our production truck rental that we just entered. Once again, that's invoice entry, AP entry within PSL Plus. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here, and we'll move on to our next field. And we have here the next step of the accounting cycle. So we have entered the vendor record information, our purchase order information for that vendor, for those goods and services they're delivering. We then receive the bill, which is the invoice from that specific vendor. And we are now ready to audit our work and post our work. So in order to audit your AP entry, select AP entry on the left-hand side here under Accounts Payable, AP entry subfolder, and select AP edit list and post. You'll notice on the left-hand side of my screen here, PSL has selected both edit and post. That's because they are the same screen. An edit is simply an audit of your work, whereas a post is a finalization of that transaction. Here in our post AP transactions screen, you have the ability to post AP transactions with various methods here, whether it is by batch, reference number, vendor, company, bank, currency, or pay type. In this case, let's say we want to just post by a specific vendor. If I was to leave everything blank here, it will post all batches, all reference numbers, all vendors, all companies. It will post everything available, so all open AP items within my system if I do not make any selection. In this case, I just want to post that most recent vendor and transaction. So I'll type in vendor 103 like we added earlier and transaction reference number 191. What you're seeing pop up after I entered those in is production truck rent that we just entered into our invoice entry, as well as the production rental co. Below we have a report type. We can select edit list, which is an audit. So just simply see the information and audit our work. This will not post our transactions. And in order to run an audit report, you may either print in the upper right-hand side of your screen or select preview. I'll select preview just to give us a show of this today. Once you have selected preview, your report will generate. Your AP edit list can be used to audit your work, go through, make sure that account coding is correct, make sure everything is correct and good. Typically, you may print this out and hand this to another assistant accountant or to the key accountant to audit the work and to post the work. Here, we're just checking over to make sure our account coding is correct, our series coding, our location coding, our descriptions, our amounts, our PO number is matched, our invoice number is matched. Everything looks good. Once you are confident in your AP entry, everything has been checked over and audited, you may navigate back to PSL Plus and select Posting Register. Once you have selected Posting Register and you run the report, you are telling your system, PSL Plus, to post the transaction, otherwise finalize the transaction here. What I can select at the top here is Print, to print out my posting register and post my transaction. Selecting print here will ask me what printer I would like to send it to. It has defaulted to Adobe PDF. I'm going to go ahead and hit print here for that. It's fine with me. Start printing out my AP post. And here you'll be asked to save your AP posting report. This is the only time in which you can generate your AP posting report. So it is good to save this. Make sure to save to your computer and keep a record of it. I'm going to title this as reference 191, vendor 103, AP. So I'm just going ahead, AP post. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter that in, hit save. It will let me know has my register printed correctly. I'll then be able to take a look at the AP posting register here at the top. And what I see here looks good to me. Everything's all good. I'll hit yes. If everything wasn't good and we need to make any changes before finalizing this transaction in our system, hit no, and you'll be able to go back and make those changes. But in this case, we're going to say yes. It will let you know that your AP transactions have been posted. Now, something to recall here is that posting journal entries, which we'll move to in a little bit later in our course, petty cash, anything that involves posting works very similar to this. So we'll be seeing that later. So just remember this area of posting as it's very similar. for other types of transactions. Hit OK and your AP transaction has been posted. Once your AP transaction has been posted to PSL Plus, you may navigate yourself to the check processing window. So the last step in your accounting cycle will usually be to cut that check for the vendor. I'm going to close up my AP entry window by selecting File and Exit. And you have multiple ways to access your check processing module within PSL Plus. You may select on the left-hand side the file folder of checks and select computer check printing here, or you may navigate to the top of your screen and select checks. Once you've selected checks at the top of your screen or computer check printing from the checks folder on your left, you will see the check information here at the top. You may select your company as well as your bank, currency, etc. We're going to select our bank here. I'm going to type in City National Bank, but again, you can right click in this field to get a pick list of available banks to process out of. I'll select City National. It's already filled in my currency as my currency is associated with my bank of US dollars. We then have our payment type. This is where we can designate this payment as a check, EFT, or wire transfer as well. And we have our starting check number. So if you recall back to our bank entry portion of this training, you saw in our CMB bank that our last issued check was number 14. So our next issued check is going to be number 15. One thing that is very important about selecting your bank in check processing window is once you have selected your bank here, you have now locked the bank for use from other folks on your production. So if anyone else is cutting checks from the system, as long as you have this window open, you are connected to the internet and your computer is on, you will have locked everyone else out from using this specific bank or cutting checks using this bank. So it is advised after your check run, after everything is all good, you've cut your checks, come up to the upper left and hit exit to make sure other people can utilize this check processing window. You then have the check date down here, which can be adjusted if necessary, as well as the allow zero checks to print too. If you have any zero checks, so memo checks that need to be printed, you can select allow zero checks to be printed. Below we have our open item selection. So in this case, if we do not select anything in this area, it will print all available checks within our system. So if we have multiple invoices, multiple references, etc., vendors, it will print it all and just do a large check run for us. However, we can select AP by due date. So if the due date is 03/10/2022 and we just want to print all checks for today's due date, we can enter that in and it'll print every check that is marked as due today. If we want to print just simply by a vendor, so let's say we just want to print out for that production rental company, we can type in that vendor number and we can print just checks for that vendor number. We can also choose a specific invoice number by right-clicking in the field is an option, or you can choose to print your checks via your batch or by the reference number. So in this case, if I want to just print for this one vendor for reference number 191, the ones we've been working on today, I'll just select 103 and 191. My system now knows to only print a single check for the production rental company and for the single reference of 191. In the upper right, when you are ready to print your computer generated checks from your printer, make sure that your check stock is loaded into your printer and ready to go. Once that is loaded up, come to the right hand side and select print. It will even remind you, just like I did now, if necessary, replace that plain paper stock with check stock now. Once you're ready, hit OK. It will then give you a rundown of what you are printing today. In this case, I'm printing one check for one open AP item, and I need one check form in order to print this. Once I hit OK here, it'll give me another message letting me know that I'm about to print checks in check run number 27. That will differ based on what your check run is in your production. And it will let you know at the end how many checks you're printing. In this case, it's one check. Here we are then now able to select our check printer. Unfortunately, folks, I do not have a check printer for this here, but we do have a guide that will be attached to this video that you may look at to see the following screens, but I will explain it. Once you select your printer and print your check, you will be asked if the check's printed correctly. If you say yes, all is well, all is good, and you'll move on, being able to cut new checks, do whatever you need to do in the system. If you say no, my checks have not printed correctly, and let's say check number 15 here got messed up, it was printed wrong, it wasn't correct, and now we need to post to number 16, you can go ahead and let the system know that the next available check number will be number 16, effectively voiding out check 15, the one that got ruined during printing. But again, we will attach a PDF document to this training in which will guide you through the check processing process. That's processing checks within PSL Plus, and always make sure to remember after you're done processing your checks, within the check screen here at the top, select File and select Exit. All right, next we will be covering journal entry. In order to access journal entry, select on the left-hand side of your screen the journal entry folder and select JE Entry. You may also select from the quick access menu at the top of your screen, J/E. Once you've opened your journal entry window, you may add a new journal entry using the add icon at the top, so F4, as we've done before in other areas of the training. Typically, journal entries are used to catalog a variety of things. Mainly, one would be funding to your bank account. So, bank account funding is a way to do so. We'll take a look at a couple of journal entries existing in our current example system here, and I will hit search at the top of my screen to show us some examples. Journal entries must always balance between debits and credits. This one's a little bit much, so we'll move to the next one. A simple journal entry here is bank account funding. We are seeing here that we entered in the effective date, the description, as well as the batch, production, company, currency. So very similar to entering an AP entry or a purchase order entry, and the journal entry number, as well as our total debits and credits. In this case, we are funding our CMB bank account with $100,000 here, the total debits being $100,000 in positive and our credits being negative. We have this coming from our CMB bank account, as you see here, and our credit from the production advance bank number 1, based on our chart of accounts. So I'll reproduce this entry just for an example for us here. I'll hit cancel at the top of my screen after searching for an entry, and I will use F4 plus to add and do CMB bank funding. It will automatically assign your batch number of your initials followed by today's date, as well as your production number, as well as your company number. Change this if necessary. Then put in your currency, as well as the journal entry number. Put in 11 here. Oh, you already got 11. It will let you know if this is a duplicate. I'm going to say no to doing the duplicate. I'll do number 12. In this case, I can enter in my account coding. So I'm funding my bank account here, so I'll put in my bank account number. And then I can put in the debit. So we'll say this is 100,000. Total debit is 100,000. And then for my production advance bank, our total credit will be negative 100,000. So we're moving 100,000 from 8211 into 7010. And from there, to process this bank funding, we can simply hit accept at the top of our screen to save. And from there, we can move to journal entry edit post on the left-hand side of our screen. This functions very similarly to our AP post. So you may choose by batch, reference, company, or currency. If you choose just simply one reference number, it will only post that reference. But if you leave all of this blank, it will post all journal entry transactions. I'll right click in here and select CMB funding, the 192 that we just created. Hit OK. And I can bring up an edit list to audit my work. similar to how we did with accounts payable. Preview. This will bring up a preview of our recent journal entry that we've selected through the journal entry post. Here we have our debit amount of 100,000 and our credit amount of 100,000. Please remember that all journal entries must balance exactly. The debit must equal the credit, and that is auditing your journal entries. In order to post this journal entry, simply select, rather than edit list here, select posting register. This will then select the posting register for you, and you'll be able to post. Select print at the top of your screen to print this out and finalize your posting. Select your printer, hit print. In this case, I'll name this after the funding, CNB Bank Funding 310 JE.PDF. Saving that with something I can remember. Clicking save. I'll ask if my register has printed correctly. I'll be able to look over this register and make sure that it is 100% correct. If it is correct, come back to PSL Plus and hit yes. If it was incorrect, you can hit no and it will not be posted. I'll hit yes. It will let me know that my journal entries have been posted to my general ledger. Hit OK. You have now posted your journal entry. And that's entering journal entries within PSL Plus. Moving forward, we'll discuss petty cash entries and how to distribute petty cash. This is if you are using physical petty cash or purchase cards. In this case, you would come to petty cash on your left-hand side, select petty cash entry. And from here, very similar to what we've seen in our entry screens, whether it be JE, AP, purchase order, we have reference number, effective date, batch, so on and so forth. In this case, if I'm creating a brand new petty cash entry, I can press F4 on my keyboard or add at the top of my screen to add a new petty cash entry. I can put PC initial float, TBAF, so that would be petty cash initial float to be accounted for, and I'll put Tim Petty here. You'll have your batch number assigned automatically with your initials followed by today's date, your production coding, as well as your bank. If you are using a PC bank, you can use the specific PC bank that you set up initially. We showed this in the beginning of our training under bank entry if you'd like to dial back to that portion, or you can select the actual bank itself. In this case, I'll work with the PC box bank. And this is for if you are issuing physical petty cash. Typically, if you're issuing checks in lieu of petty cash, you would use accounts payable to do so. If you're issuing actual petty cash, you may utilize this. Selecting petty cash under vendor information will allow us access to any vendor marked as a petty cash recipient. As we talked about in our vendor entry screen, you must mark off that the vendor is approved to receive petty cash and properly code the petty cash account number. In this case, if I want to see available vendors for petty cash, I may right-click into the ID portion, and here I can see the available petty cash vendors. You'll notice that this is quite a few less vendors than we had in previous occurrences of vendor entry. This is because these are the only vendors with petty cash account numbers assigned to them, and the petty cash box is checked within vendor entry. In this case, I'll select Tim Petty here, hit OK, and we have our PC advance account of 7103-000 to track the expenditures in which we are giving to Tim Petty as petty cash floats, as well as what has been returned. In this case, I can enter in the envelope number, whatever that may be. I'll do PC 1020. Amount advanced, so how much we've advanced to the crew member, I'll put in 500. Tab through, and what this will be doing here is an initial float for Tim Petty to simply issue $500 in petty cash. This isn't accounting for any expenditures, anything like that. This is simply an initial float. I'll show saving this petty cash initial float, and then I will show us an entry where we have received funds back from the petty cash recipient. Simply to catalog this, hit accept at the top of your screen. It will save transaction number 193. And once it has been saved, we are good to go to issue that. We can audit and post. However, if we were doing a P card, it would be the exact same process. We would just select P card instead of petty cash. If I want to show you guys a few different examples here, I can hit search at the top and we can look at some existing petty cash transactions. Here we have a petty cash transaction where an individual returned quite a few receipts for tolls, ice, fuels, meals. As you can see, they're listed in positive numbers, coded to the correct accounts. And at the bottom here, you can see that there was $541.49 advanced, and we accounted for $541.49. To essentially, we are giving Tim Petty another $541.49 while accounting for the $541.49 that he has brought back in. This works very similarly for P cards, and I'll show a P card transaction as well. But with P cards here, you can also search, cancel, and be able to find P cards. Select P card right here and hit search. And here is a purchase card entry for Archie Topman. And here we have our P card right here. If you are using a P card supplier and you have a Excel that you can import, it can be done so on the left-hand side under petty cash. You can select import an Excel file to import that petty cash or purchase card file, and select the file from your computer, which is usually a CSV file, and select PC here at the bottom. Once you've selected PC, you may select P card and then just fill in the yellow required fields, such as vendor number, so the recipient of the purchase card, the envelope number, state worked, batch, production, company, bank, currency, series, location, and set. Once you are ready to load this purchase card file into your system, select loading register and hit print. It will load the purchase card into your system. Make sure that P card vendor is checked off. There will be a guide attached to this training to further detail how to work with purchase cards within PSL Plus, but that is working with petty cash in our system. To show the edit and post process of PC, I'll be selecting PC edit and post on the left-hand side. In this case, it is very similar to posting any other type of transaction within PSL Plus. You may select by batch, reference, vendor, company, bank, or currency. If all are left blank, you will post all open petty cash items to your system by selecting posting register and hitting print. It is the exact same process we saw with AP, with journal entry, just done through petty cash. And that is petty cash within PSL Plus. So I'll be coming up to the top of my screen and exiting our petty cash entry window, as well as exiting my journal entry window from earlier, and discussing our posted items editor. Posted items editor can be found in journal entry under posted items editor. A note about posted items editor here is that your studio and/or financier may have rules about utilizing this area of PSL Plus, so please check with your studio financier if this is allowed to be used. However, to use the posted items editor, please select posted items editor under journal entry. The posted items editor can be used to edit account coding and the like for any items that have already been posted. So for example, we posted our transaction earlier for AP. So let's say that during our AP entry, we made a mistake and we need to correct that mistake. We can search for our transaction number of 191 for that AP entry and hit search at the top of our screen or press F7. And now I've brought up my production truck rental that we worked on earlier. This has already been posted. And if I need to make a change to my posted item editor here, I can come down to my accounts coding and say, well, it was supposed to be coded to episode 101 and not episode 199. Once I've done that, I can change my coding of series from 199 to 101 and hit accept at the top of my screen. that will go ahead and save my posted items editor batch. In that case, we can come back to our post.jE transactions and you would be able to work with your was/is. But that is your posted items editor. Once again, posted items editor, you can come in there, select the transaction number in which you need to make changes for, and make your changes freely here. However, once again, please check in with your studio to make sure that this is allowed to be done within your system. All right, moving forward, that was posted items editor under journal entry. We'll be moving into payroll. So loading your cast and crew payroll invoices into your system from cast and crew. So once your payroll has been processed with cast and crew and your payroll coordinator has released your payroll, you may come over to payroll on the left-hand side of PSL Plus, open up the folder payroll and select load CNC invoice. Once you've selected load CNC invoice, you'll be greeted with the interface from cast and crew payroll screen. Under invoice information, you may right click in the invoice field to see available invoices. So as long as your invoice has been posted and processed by your cast and crew payroll coordinator, it should be able to be loaded into your PSL Plus system. You can right click into the invoice area of load CNC invoice to see a list of available invoices to load into your system. In this case, I'll be loading 216-22047. Hit OK once you've selected your invoice. And below we have our options. You may load data only with the employee information without the payroll data. This may or may not be useful to certain productions, but it is an option if you need it. It will simply just load the employee information and no payroll data. Typically, this option is not widely used. If you need to edit your work first, so audit to take a look at your work first, you would choose edit list rather than loading register. Loading register will load this payroll into our system and make it ready for editing and posting. If we want to just simply look over this payroll before loading it, simply select edit list. You then need to enter in your batch information. So I put my initials followed by today's date, your production information, as well as your bank information in which you will be paying for this invoice, and your currency, as well as your series coding, location coding, and set coding. You may also fill in insurance and free field coding if necessary. In order to get an audit for this payroll before you load it into your system, you can select preview on the right-hand side to generate a preview PDF of this payroll. Once you've generated your payroll PDF here, you can look over all of the overtime, pay codes, etc. that need to be looked at. Check over everything here, make sure it is correct. If everything is all good, simply navigate back to PSL Plus and select loading register opposed to edit list. Loading register will load this payroll into the PSL Plus system. Select print in the upper right. Hit print here on your selected printer. Since I've used Adobe PDF, I'm printing it to my computer and I'm going to save this. PR invoice 216-22047 PDF, just something I can recognize there. Hit save. This will print the payroll register. Take a look over your payroll posting register. Make sure everything is correct. Looks good. Navigate back to PSL Plus. Has the report printed correctly? If no, select no. If yes, select yes. Once you have selected yes, it will give you a reference number for the transaction. Your invoice has been loaded. It is important to note that your invoice for payroll has not been posted. It has not been processed yet. It is just loaded into PSL Plus. Exiting the interface from Cast and Crew Payroll, which is Load CNC Invoice, We've just covered loading your cast and crew invoice into PSL Plus. Select payroll entry if any changes to this payroll need to be made. So in the sense of changes, we have our transaction number of 194. Select search once you have entered your transaction number, and it will bring up the payroll that we just loaded in through Load CNC Invoice. If you need to make any changes to the coding, you may do so. So for example, if Clark J here actually worked on episode 102, I can change my coding here to 102 before posting the payroll to my system. After I've made these changes from episode series code 101 to 102, I'll come up to the top, select accept, and now I have made changes to my payroll. That would be editing payroll after loading with your cast and crew invoice. In order to post your payroll to your system, come to Payroll Edit List and Payroll Post on the left-hand side of your screen under the Payroll folder. Once you've opened the Post Payroll Transactions window, again, very similar to our other posting transaction windows, you may post by batch, reference, invoice, company, bank, and currency. If all are left blank, you will post all available payroll to your system. If you want to include a specific reference, a specific invoice, or a specific batch, simply right-click in the text field and select the specific reference or specific batch, invoice, etc. I'll be selecting that 194 reference we just looked at. Now that I've audited my work, I've already made changes to my work, I'm ready to post. I can select Posting Register, and again, simply select Print in the upper right, similar to posting any other type of transaction within PSL Plus. Print to your printer of choice. In this case, I'm using Adobe PDF. And from here, you can save your payroll posting register here. So PR invoice 216-22047. I'll put posting register. So save that for my records, as this is the only time that I'll be able to receive this specific report. Save that to my computer. Again, it will ask if the register has printed correctly. Yes, my coding changes did take place. I changed my series coding to episode 102 opposed to 101, and everything looks correct. I'll minimize my Adobe PDF and say yes, the register has printed correctly. PSL will now let me know that payroll distributions have been posted to my general ledger. That is posting, loading, and processing payroll through PSL Plus using a cast and crew invoice. You also have print on-site payroll checks here. A guide will be included with this video on the PDF links below. If you need help with printing remote checks for your payroll, please feel free to give us a call here at Cast and Crew. And that is our payroll module within PSL Plus. Moving forward, we'll be discussing GLs, budget, cost, and closing periods. To discuss our general ledger, select General Ledger on the left-hand side of your screen. You'll have Chart of Accounts entry as well as Chart of Accounts list. If you need to print out a list of your Chart of Accounts, use Chart of Accounts list. It is a report that will generate a full listing of your Chart of Accounts. Simply select Chart of Accounts list and print on the right-hand side. You may save this with the name of your show followed by COA for Chart of Accounts. Once again, that is Chart of Accounts list, and just simply print your Chart of Accounts to have a copy of your Chart of Accounts within PSL Plus. In order to add a new cost account or a sub-account to our Chart of Accounts, select Chart of Accounts entry under GL on the left-hand side. Once you have selected Chart of Accounts entry, you may search for specific accounts if you would like by typing in the account number. However, if you would just like to see your full list of your Chart of Accounts, press F7 or Find at the top of your screen. It may give you a warning letting you know that there are quite a few accounts in your system, and if you would really like to search for all of them, it may take a while. Hit yes. In this case, it only took about 2 seconds. So we have our full chart of accounts here. If we need to add a new cost account, we can do so by pressing add at the top and entering the cost account information. If we'd like to add a specific sub account, we can come to our specific account that we'd like to add. Selecting 1117, I would like to add a sub account for a rentals account here under 1117-000. I'll select that specific field under account number and press add. Once I have pressed add or F4 on my keyboard, I'll type in that sub account of 1117-001, adding a sub account for my 1117 cost account. I'll use the example of cell phone rental. That is how you add a sub account or a cost account within the PSL Plus under your general ledger chart of accounts. On the right side here, we do have the type of account this is, as well as the line type. The types range from asset, A for asset, L for liability, C for capital, I for income, and E for expense. So you may see your expense accounts along with your asset accounts here as well. And under line type, this refers to whether the cost is above the line, A for above the line, and B for below the line. If you want to finalize adding your sub account as we added just here, the cell phone rental of 1117-001 cell phone rental, simply hit accept at the top of your screen and that cost account will now be available for use. Well, in this case, it would be a sub account. That's adding cost accounts or sub accounts into PSL Plus using the general ledger folder and chart of accounts entry on the left-hand side. From there, we'll discuss our budgeting as well as our cost reporting and our period closing. For budgets, if you're uploading a new budget to your system, you'll first create that budget under Create a Budget on the left-hand side under Budgets. You may give this budget a name. In the case of me adding a new episode, I can add 106 for my 6th episode here and press Tab. It'll ask if I'd like to create this budget. I'll say yes. Once the budget is created, I can name it Epi 106, production, type in my production number, and I can add the budget lines for account range. So if my first expense account is 1101-000 to 6950-000, that will be for my full chart of accounts. You can fill your budget lines with a specific series code. So in this case, I've added that series code earlier in our training of 106, our location, as well as our set, and the default base currency for this budget. In this case, I have created it to be a US currency budget. This would create the budget for my system once I hit create on the right-hand side. Once your budget has been created, you may go to import a budget on the left-hand side. So if you're working with a file that you'll be using to import into PSL Plus, you may select the file from Interface File under Import a Budget on the top end of Import a Budget window. We'll bring into your PC settings here and you'll be able to select that budget text file. If you have any issue uploading your budget to the system, feel free to call PSL support for some assistance. You'll need to put in your budget name here that needs to exist from creating a budget, as well as your series, location, set, and currency. From there, you can select if you'd like new accounts to be created. So if there are new accounts that don't already exist in your chart of accounts within PSL Plus, but they're in your budget, you can select this and it will add those new accounts into PSL Plus. You may also select what you would like to be done with the duplicate budget amounts. So if you've already entered budget amounts into your system and you want to combine the existing amounts with the interface amounts, the existing amounts would be the already budgeted amount within your system. The interface amounts would be the amounts located inside the budget file. Replace existing amounts with interface amounts. So an example for this, if you're combining the existing amounts with interface amounts, we'll say that our account 1101 has 500,000 in it, originally budgeted. In our interface, we have another 200,000 budgeted. If I combined, it will make 700,000. If I replace existing amounts with interface amounts, it will replace the 500,000 with 200,000. And if I preserve budget amounts and ignore the interface amounts, it will simply leave that 1101 account budgeted at 500,000. Once you are ready to import, you can either preview edit, which will give you a preliminary preview to show you how things will look once they are imported in, or you may select import and it will import the interfaced budget with your existing budget in PSL Plus. That's importing a budget to PSL Plus. Moving forward, we'll talk about budget amount entry. If you need to change any amounts in your budget or enter them manually, you may utilize budget amount entry. Once selecting budget amount entry, you may select the budget code. And to select that, you can right-click in this field in order to pull up your budgets. If you only have one budget, it may give you a ding noise, in which case use the search icon at the top. If you have multiple budgets, right-click in the budget code field. Select the budget in which you want to do entry for. In this case, I'll be selecting episode 1. Once I've selected episode 1, I'll add in my production by right-clicking in that field. And from there, I'll hit my search icon at the top of my screen. Here I can see my budgeted amounts, my total budget, as well as my currency that I budgeted in, and all accounts here, including my zero accounts. If I need to add any specific numbers to my budget manually without doing an interface or an import, I can come in here and add for 1203-000, I'll add $50,000. And that is adding budget amounts manually into PSL Plus using budget amount entry found in folders under budget folder. Simply hit accept if you are to add that amount to your budget. So once again, if you want to add 50,000 to 1204 manually without a budget interface file, simply add that in and press accept at the top of your screen. And now that has been added to your budget amounts. That is creating a budget, importing a budget, and budget amount entry within PSL Plus budget folder. We'll then be looking at closing your financial periods. So to close your financial period on the left side of your screen, select Close Period. Under Close Period, you have Current Period. It will show the start date as well as the end date here. Simply enter in the correct end date for the period. In this case, I will enter in 3/10/2022. You may also set the dates for your future period. So if you wanted to make sure that this period closes out on 3/19/2022, it will automatically do so if you put it in this way. To show you here, if I would like to close my period, I can preview with an edit list. And just another reoccurring theme here in PSL Plus, register or edit list. Edit list or post. Register is essentially just a way of registering the data as finalized. Posting is posting a finalized transaction. Edit is a preliminary check for you to be able to edit and audit your work before finalizing. So just think of closing register and posting as a finalization of data. Edit list here, I'm going to select edit list with 3/10 end date and hit preview. This will do here is will give us our account summaries here for Canadian dollars, as well as our other account summaries here for our closing period for the period that we are closing. So we're seeing our net change, our credits, our debits, our beginning balances, and our ending balances here. So we can see what is going on with that. And we can see the following closing errors have occurred. So when closing your period, you will not be able to close your financial period until all transactions for this period have been posted, reversed, or essentially deleted, anything like that, but they need to be posted first or rid of in some way before you can close your period. So this will always give us a preview of what can be done when closing. So closing not allowed until the above problems have been fixed. The only problems we're really looking at here is we need to finish posting all of our transactions and finalize them before moving to the next period. In that case, if we wanted to close this period, we would need to go back and post and finalize those transactions. However, if those were already finalized, posted, and done, we could select closing register, close period, hit print, and we would be allowed to close and move to the next period. So just remember to run this preview before closing and finalize any open AP, JE, petty cash, purchase card, etc. that need to be finalized. That is closing financial periods within PSL Plus. Next, we will be talking about reporting, specifically Bible reporting, cost reporting, trial balance, and bank reconciliations. We'll start with first our cost reporting. So to select cost reporting, you may open your cost reporting folder on your left-hand side. And what we will start with today is making your EFC, so estimated final cost changes, as well as your variance changes within PSL Plus. I will select the EFC worksheet in this case. EFC worksheet will allow us to change any estimated final cost, cost to complete, or variances within our system. Here I can select my budgets at the top of my screen. I can either type those in or I can right click in the field. Typically I would right click in the field for cost report worksheet, EFC worksheet, found under cost report on the left. In this case, I could select all budgets by selecting the all icon here at the bottom of my screen, which would select every single budget for me to do EFC or variance work on. If I didn't want, let's say, new budget, I can hold left control on my keyboard and left click in new budget. That will remove it from my selection. I may also unselect any other budget I don't want to use. So if I didn't want to use 101, I can hold control and left click, or 103, I can hold control and left click. If I want to reselect episode 101, I can hold control and left click. So that is pretty much how you remove or add to this list. I'll select everything but our new budget there and hit OK. This has selected my 6 budgets in total, which we can see in the budget line in brackets. It says 6 have been selected. We have episode 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, and a mort. I then have period. It is saying CUR for current period. And my dates for my period here are 12/01/21 to 12/30/2021. In this case, if I'd like to select a previous period, I can delete current from the period selection and right click in this field to see available previous periods. In this case, I have current, second period, and first period. So if I wanted to run for my second period, I can select here and hit OK. But we'll keep it at current for us here. From here, we then have selections. So if you wanted to do this by company code, series code, location, set, insurance, free field, or free field 2, you may do so. You then can select whether you would like a summary or a detail. In this case, we'll stick with detail. We then have our include options on the right-hand side. You have include inactive accounts. What that means is any account with no activity. So any zero sum total account that has no transactions, hasn't had a PO, it hasn't had a AP, nothing has happened with this account. If you select this, it will print all of your chart of accounts. So lots of times I would say to leave this blank, but if you do need a full view of every single account in your cost accounts, go ahead and select this. Budget amount as activity. This is actually quite useful as it would consider your budgeted amount for a cost account as an activity. So whether there has been any AP, purchase order, or any kind of transactions done within that specific cost account, it doesn't matter as long as it is budgeted. It will be considered an active account. So if there's $5 in an account, it will show up as long as you have selected budget amount as activity. Open items as actual costs. This will treat any open AP items as an actual cost. This can be very useful as well. If you don't want this option, just simply uncheck for it to treat those open items as pending. Committed costs, this refers to POs. If you select this, it will include costs from POs as commits. We then have subtotals here at the bottom, so to include your subtotals. You then can narrow down your account range if you would like, establishing from your first expense account to your last expense account. We then have your reference and batch number. This does need to be filled in to track the changes that you are making to your EFC or your variance entry. In this case, I'll type in my batch, which is my initials followed by today's date. You then can put in your company information. So once again, if you have multiple companies, please fill in this information correctly based on what cost report you're looking for, based on what company you're working with. Variance reference information here. So this would be for the transaction reference number that will be assigned to this variance. It will automatically assign the next available transaction number in the system. But let's say you want to put in a different reference number for all of your variance changes, all of your EFC changes. You could start it off something like this. Just to differentiate between AP, JE, etc., and variance EFC change reference numbers. You can enter it in on your own. You then have the effective date, which will automatically default to today's date based on your computer's local system settings. However, you can change this if you would like. You then have the option for multi-currency. So you could put in, let's say, our source currency of US, but you want to target that conversion rate of 1.25 that you have for your Canadian and put in CD as Canadian dollars target. It will run this based off of that 1.25 budgeted conversion rate that we saw in the beginning of our training. However, I will be running this in US currency normally. And when you are ready to look at your worksheet to make your changes to EFC, variance, etc., select worksheet in the upper right hand side. Once you have selected worksheet, EFC worksheet will appear based on your selections, and you are able to make changes to your cost to complete, your estimated final cost, and your variance. For example, here we'll be using the account 1108-000 script printing. Now, if I add here, we have a negative 800 variance here for our script printing. If I add in script printing, I add $5,000, which the current amount for our estimated final cost is $6,964. If I add, let's say 5,000 here, it will add to 7,464. So I'll add 500 rather, adding $500 here. What we'll see once I change this is it has added 500 to my variance by raising the cost to complete by 500. However, if I go to my variance and type in, say, 1,000, it will lower my estimated final cost by 1,000. So the budgeted amount is 6,164. By putting 1,000 in, we have an estimated final cost of 5,164. So you may make your changes here however you would like. If you'd like to make them on the EFC or on the variance, just make your changes correctly and then put in the variance description. So extra print costs, just a general example there. And for purchases, if I want to make a change to our purchases on the 1116 account here, which our budgeted amount is 7,625, it's going to cost us an extra 3,000 to complete. I'll put in 10,625. It's going to automatically fill out my variance here to negative 3,000 to let me know that we have a $3,000 variance between what we budgeted and our estimated final cost. Now, put in your description for that variance. And once you're ready, once you're done making your changes in this screen, you can keep going, make as many as you need to make. Simply hit accept in the lower right, and it will let you know that your variances have been placed in the next available reference transaction number. In this case, 195. So that is using your EFC cost report worksheet within PSL Plus to make changes to variance in the EFC. You can also make independent changes to variance in EFC through EFC Entry and Variance Entry. Included with this training video as well as the manual, you will be able to look over how these are entered using EFC and Variance Entry. However, we did just receive that 100 and I believe 95 transaction reference number for our Variance Entry. So I can select Variance Entry to take a look at that by coming to Variance Entry on our left hand side and selecting a number here. I can right click in and find available changes that have been made. Here's the change I just made, 195. Hit OK. You'll see my batch as well as the accounts I made changes to and the descriptions I placed in, letting me know the total variances that were made. So the total variance is 1200, as one was positive and one was negative. So that is how you make variance and EFC changes within PSL Plus. Segueing now to running the cost report itself, printing a cost report, whether that be combined, individual, with the various settings. We'll select cost report here on the left-hand side. Additionally, you do have number 7 from your quick access bar at the top, which will also bring you to cost reporting. A lot of the details we are seeing in this screen are very similar to the ones we saw in EFC Entry. They are very much the same type of options we had before. So if we want to select our budget, right click in budget, select all. I'm going to remove new budget once again and hit OK. I've now selected 6 of my budgets to run the cost report for. We have period. Again, you can delete that out to get previous periods. And you have your selections, company, series, location, set, etc., as well as your format and your ability to run the report based on detail, summary, or both. I'll go ahead and do both just to give us a show of how this looks. Inactive accounts works the same as we saw in EFC Worksheet. It will include accounts with no activity, so 0 amounts. Treating budget amount as activity. Open items as actual costs, and include committed costs. You then have the option as well as the bottom to narrow down your expense accounts, as well as work with multi-currency source and target. On the right-hand side, you have various options to view this report. You can either print or preview a combined report or individual report, which will generate this in a PDF format. Or you may select spreadsheet, which will give you a spreadsheet for this report, a Excel file. We will go ahead and select preview combined report today. This will generate our cost report, our combined cost report. Here we're seeing our cost report with our previous cost to date, our actuals this period, committed, total cost to date, cost to complete, EFC, our budgeted, as well as our variances. So print out, for my production, it's only printed out about 11 pages. Yours might be a bit longer. And again, just remember that your chart of accounts and coding structure may differ significantly from the one you were seeing in this example training. That is running your cost reports within PSL Plus. Navigating back to PSL Plus, we have a few more things to cover before our training ends for the day. In this case, I will be closing up cost report here and closing our cost report window by selecting File and Exit. From here, to run 2 other very important reports is our Bible report as well as our trial balance report. You can select these in a multitude of ways. Bible report is found at the top of your screen under Bible report number 8 on the quick access menu, or you can find this in G/L for general ledger under Bible report here. This will bring up the Bible report. It does have very similar options of selection to our cost report. However, the Bible does cover all costs, anything pertaining to our production, all ins and outs, all monies. It is essentially the end all be all report. We may select by period as we've done before. We may select by account selection if we'd like to limit our accounts. We can also limit to the type of account. So whereas our cost report focused solely on our expense accounts, this will allow us to see assets, liabilities, capital, income, and expense if we'd like. So if we just want to run this for assets, you could put an A in here and it would just run for assets. Include/exclude, you can include the detail here, so distribution detail, as well as include inactive accounts, so accounts with no activity. Include open purchase orders, so unrelieved purchase orders. And then you can also include beginning balance, as well as beginning balance as activity. From there, you have include vendor address and include audit information. Please note that include vendor address or audit information only work if you are using a spreadsheet generation and not a PDF generation. On the right side, we have our show/hide section where you can show series separation, location separation, set separation, company separation, as well as reference description and vendor/employee ID. And you have your multiple currency option as well, as we saw before in cost report. If you wanted to see your report based on the source currency of USD but converted to Canadian dollars, you can do that right here. And again, this is based on our setup and our currency setup here. So make sure those currencies are set up correctly in order for this to function. Target currency is US. We will preview a combined report for this to go ahead and give us an idea of what a Bible looks like. It seems to have generated a report solely intended for ants. I'll go ahead up to the top of my screen and magnify this to about 125%. Actually, let's go a little bit bigger, 135%. Now I can read it. Here, we can see our non-expense accounts coming up first, so our bank accounts, our wire fees, all the kind of stuff that we've been working with here, and scroll through to see our full beginning balances. Again, you can limit this down if necessary to specific areas, specific accounts. If you don't want the full Bible run, you can do that as well. And here we have all of our petty cash as well. But this is how you run a Bible report within PSL Plus. Once again, finding your Bible report is on the left-hand side and G/L for General Ledger, and found within Bible Report or at the top of your screen, Bible Report under the Quick Access menu, second to last option, number 8. I'll go ahead and exit out of my Bible Report and we'll move to our final report that we'll be looking at before our final section of bank reconciliation. And in this case, we'll take a look at Trial Balance Report. That's found in General Ledger G/L. Select Trial Balance Report. You can also select this in the upper right hand side under number 9 of your Quick Access menu to run your Trial Balance Report. Once you have opened your Trial Balance Report, you do need to select a report ID. That is one of the required fields here. Again, yellow fields within PSL Plus are required. They must be filled out in order for you to get the information. In this case, right-click in this field to see available report IDs. In this case, we have Summary Trial Balance, Detailed Trial Balance. 2 different options for you there. I'll select the summary for our training today. Again, we may select our period, whether that be current or previous period. You may select here. You may also select a range of accounts from and to. From there, you can also do selection criteria. So company, series, location, set, insurance-free field, source code. Source code, if I right-click in this field, source code refers to what is the source of the transaction. A source code is AP for accounts payable, CK for check, JE for journal entry, PC for petty cash, PO for purchase order, and PR for payroll. Different source codes. You could run down by any of them you wish, or multiples if you'd like. You then have journal entry number, if you'd like to include just a specific range of journal entry numbers, but you may leave this blank to get all journal entry numbers in your trial balance. Including the detail, inactive accounts as well if you'd like. I'll include detail on this one. And you can put your beginning balance as activity, and then you have your separation as we saw in previous screens, previous reports. Show separation for series, location, and set. And then we also have source currency as well as target currency for running in the correct currency that we'd like. On the right, you have the option to print, preview, or generate a spreadsheet. In this case, I'm going to do a preview to generate a temporary PDF file for me. I could print and save this as well, but we'll just generate the temporary file. Again, kind of a small report. I'll make this a little bigger for us. And from here, we can see our trial balance report, which is showing our trial balance. And from here, you can look through this report, generate it into a PDF or to a Excel spreadsheet, but you'll see your AP clearing any of your bank accounts to see the exact status of your bank and what the totals are at the beginning of balance. Beginning balance is here under beginning balance, current activity in the middle, and ending balance here for each of your bank accounts, PC banks, your liabilities, and your assets. All right, that is running a trial balance within PSL Plus. And one of our final areas today I'll be going over is our bank reconciliation. So bank reconciliation here under the checks area of PSL Plus, opening the checks folder and selecting bank reconciliation, which is the final option on the left-hand side. You may select this, which will open your bank reconciliation window. Once you have bank reconciliation and you're ready to reconcile your bank statement, you may right-click into the bank field here, which will allow you to select between the Bars Clay Bank or whatever bank you have in your system. So once you select your bank, right-click into your bank, it will show you a list of available banks to run your bank reconciliation from. In this case, I will use our example bank of CNB. Hit OK, and you may now include deposits and checks. Select one line per check number if you'd like. Use statement date as your cutoff date if that is preferable for you. You may enter in your statement date if it differs from today's date. You can include your voided checks if you would like. And then you can select how you would like it sorted, whether it's by date, check number, vendor name, amount low to high, amount high to low, and then the description here, whether it be reference or distribution. So the deposit description type, whether you would like reference or the distribution. Then you may put in your statement balance as well. This does need to be filled out based on your bank statement. I apologize, I don't have one in front of me at the moment, so I won't be able to really enter the exact bank statement for you since we're using a fake bank. But we have retrieve archive report as well. So any previously done bank reconciliations can be found here. Simply right-click in this field to find a previous bank reconciliation if you'd like to look it over. However, in this case, I'm just going to simply select Start in the upper right-hand side of my screen. And that will bring me to my bank rec, where I can see any of my deposits. So I have 2 deposits here. One of them we entered today. If I need to mark those as cleared, I can write in C for cleared, and it will automatically put in the clear date based on the period there. If I want to unclear all checks or unclear all deposits, I can select unclear all checks or unclear all deposits on the right-hand side here, or clear all checks and clear all deposits, which would simply just add for these 2 checks down here on the left. If I hit clear all checks, it's just going to add a clear for me for the date. And boom, those are in. Once you are ready to reconcile, you can select reconcile here on the right-hand side, and it will reconcile these items. And that is running your bank reconciliation through PSL Plus. With that said, I'll be concluding our training recording for today. Thank you for your time and enjoy using PSL Plus.